Hello.
Hey, Dr. Preston.
Can you believe it? Our second to last meeting.
I know it's just so fast.
Even with it going so slow, it went so fast.
Exactly.
I put a couple things up on the blog. Have you guys seen it at all today?
the pen, the penultimate something.
Penultimate. That means second to last.
I think that word also has like a root in Spanish, penúltima. And there's a one like about syllabus. It just reminded me of that.
Nice. Well, it's funny because usually when people use the word ultimate, they're using it as a compliment, like awesome. And it's kind of empty, but it really means final. So if this is like your ultimate challenge, we should call it Ultimate Week. What roaring silence I get in approval.
Yeah.
So that being said, the other thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to go ahead and get into the surviving with class. But the other thing I wanted to talk about from the blog was, did anybody happen to read my offering for today's journal? Am I hearing you scampering for your keyboards as we do this? Do you want to see it on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not doing this to trick you or keep you in suspense. So give me 1 second and I'll share the screen. There we go. And one of the things that's come up for everyone this week, I mean, you would think we weren't in the middle of a pandemic because that's not what people are talking about for these last 7 days. What are people talking about?
The Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, and in general, a pretty systemic structural approach to inequality in this country that's leading to a whole lot of bad feelings and divisiveness. So choose your headline, they're all ugly. But none of this is new. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was, when I was in high school and college, there were flashpoints just like this. You've heard of the Rodney King case? Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, vaguely.
Okay, well, that spurred riots and protests in Los Angeles, and that's when I was a freshman in college. No, sorry, that's when I was a senior in college. When I was a freshman in college was what I wrote about in today's journal, because there was a rap group, and it was weird for me to read this in Wikipedia today, but there was apparently a golden age of rap, and I was in the middle of it, that went from like the mid 80s to the early 90s. And then at that time, people weren't trying to be like other artists because there were no other artists who were doing things in that way. Every group that came up was basically making up the entire genre as they went along. And one of the one of the groups was NWA, which I won't define, but you can look up. And you all know who Ice Cube is?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, he was one of the 3 members of NWA. And they had a song about the police that, if you haven't heard it, there's a link on the blog. But all of this is absolutely my own experience. And I think that if people want space to explore this, I'm completely open. If you want to move right into surviving with class, I'm open to that too. So what's your preference?
I feel like this is kind of interesting, especially like today with everything going on.
Okay. Then we can push surviving with class. And by the way, that's not going to end just because we're essentially done with our online meetings tomorrow. I'm just getting into that now and editing. And a few students have shared with me things from their blogs that they're also copying and pasting in. So it looks like we're going to have a pretty substantial set of material. And what I'll do tomorrow in our meeting is think out loud with you about next steps and invite people to continue collaborating with me over the summer on that, because it's going to take a little while. So let me throw it back to all of you as we think about this stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen because I know you can see this for yourselves. What's jumping out at you about this moment, whether it's education and your thoughts for fall, whether it's the police actions, the federal government, the White House? What's on your mind about this?
For me personally, it's kind of just like all that combined at once. Cause like I feel like every which way, especially with social media, like we're brought this news and this attention like so quickly. Like I'm getting different like sources of information and new information like every day. That like sometimes like even my brain is just like an overload and like just stressed and tired from it because it's so much to take in. Especially like we're handling a pandemic, a movement, dealing with racism, we're dealing with like all this crazy stuff, and like it's only been halfway through 2020 and it's been crazy.
Yeah.
So that's personally that's me.
Well, thanks for that, Deanna. I think it's a really important set of points you're making. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Is that your experience or is it different?
It's been around the same, especially now at dinner with my family when we gather together, we talk about it. We talk about our families. We also like, you know, we just keep in touch with everyone we can, our loved ones, and yeah, basically kind of like the same. And then sometimes it's also kind of stressful because you hear a lot of these like bad news every day, everywhere, and then new videos are being uploaded about the Black movement, and it's just hard to see that that was going on in the world, and sometimes we didn't even notice, or it wasn't really talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Has anyone ever flown on an airplane?
Once, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one time.
Yeah. So do you remember, you know, they gave that safety talk before takeoff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do they tell you to do when the oxygen masks drop? Who do you put it on first?
Yourself.
Yeah. Why? That seems selfish.
Because you can't help others if you're not helping yourself first. Like if you can't breathe, how are you gonna help others?
Okay. Can anyone make a connection between that and why I might have brought it up and this moment and the feelings that you're sharing about what you're seeing and experiencing?
Is it because like they're putting like tape on their mouths and then be saying like I can't breathe? Is that like how you're the connection you're trying to make with it?
Ooh, you know, one of the things I love about learning with you guys out loud is that sometimes you'll make a connection that I wasn't even thinking of. So Emma, that's kind of brilliant. I was actually thinking of it a little bit differently because when I heard Deanna say how much stress and fatigue that this can create, that led me to think you wind up feeling a little dizzy. You don't really know at first glance what you can trust. You don't know what you can control, what you can do about it. And it can get kind of overwhelming. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gets frustrating.
Yeah. So I think my first, if I'm going to build this block by block with you, if we're going to really build a way to survive and thrive through this, because I don't just want to live, I want to actually help make things better with you and for you. It seems like we need to be in good shape physically and mentally and emotionally. And that's why throughout the quarantine, you've heard me saying things and you've read me writing things like sleep and how we eat and how we exercise, because we need to be in shape for this life that is kind of demanding. And then the second thing is, how do we take information? Are we on social media all day where it just pings us endlessly and we can't shut it off? Do we give ourselves little blocks of time? And I'm going to say, okay, well, it's 1:30. From 1:30 to 2, I'm going to look at headlines and be an informed citizen. And I have sources that I know are credible and that I can trust. And if not, I at least know that I can run something by Dr. Preston and see what he thinks and why, so that I can get better at evaluating sources of my own information. But at 2 o'clock, I'm also going to shift gears and I'm going to shut that off. Because just like behind me, you see all these books, I can close a book and put it away. It's not constantly pestering me to read it more or to respond to it or to make me feel bad. So number one, when I say putting our own oxygen mask on, I mean taking care of ourselves so that we're in good shape. So that we, on a plane, you put your own oxygen mask on so that you can keep breathing and not lose consciousness so that you can help the kid next to you. Number two is, I think it's important to have a balance. Yes, I want you to be informed and I want you to be aware so that you can participate in this democracy, because you're a year away from voting, some of you, and you're a year away from, whether it's serving in the military, going to college or university, joining the working world. You're one of us. I'm one of you. And I want you to be operating with your eyes open. I also don't want you to be drowning in this sea of constant blah, 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 because it's really hard to know where to draw the line and have a boundary. I want to pause there. Does that make sense? And can I get some reflection on what you just heard me say?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's helpful too. I'm sorry. So I cut someone off. Do you guys want to keep going? Whoever it was.
I would much rather have two people talking at once than no people talking at all. So go for it. I don't care who it was.
Oh, it's silent again. Okay, well, I'll just say, I think it was really helpful, especially like, cause me, like, you know, like you said, like our phone is always like kind of pinging at us, like whenever a new news article is posted or something. And like a part of me like wants to be informed, but then a part of me, like my brain is just really exhausted and tiring and fighting for what I believe in. And sometimes it's just tiring, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think being able to close it for a bit and then come back to it, so that way we take care of both our health and then whatever movement we're like, you know, fighting for is like both like important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Deanna. And Odalis, I think you were the other person. What were you going to say?
I would say it does make sense. And I agree because, like for example, the coronavirus, people are like going protesting, and sometimes what I've seen was that some people, like it was very few, but they would take their mask off in the middle of it, which was kind of scary because you don't really know if they would get sick or they would get you sick.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. About the phone, so I'm wondering, I don't have the notifications on my phone. In fact, I have my phone on mute almost all of the time, unless one of my family members is not with me and I know that I need to be available in case one of them needs me. So what I'm wondering is, what goes into the decision to turn on the notifications or turn them off? How come you have them on? What does it do for you?
For me, it's kind of similar to what you said, not family wise, but like friends or like other people as well. Like I have it on for that way that if they need to contact me, like I know that they contact me.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the other times though, like when I know like where everyone's at and no one's really trying to contact me, I usually just shut it off.
Okay. Because it used to be that the only people who had, like, back in my growing up days, it was the pagers, right? And the only people who were like that much on call were people like brain surgeons or heart surgeons or Air Force pilots. And everybody else was like just acting way too important. And nobody needs me that much. So, I think it's wise to ask ourselves those kinds of questions. And like Deanna was saying, if you have a legitimate need, if you know that a family member might need to reach out to you, then by all means, turn that on and be available. But to be constantly at that state of like a bell rings and I respond to it, even if nothing else was going on, that gets tiring on a certain level. I think we get worn out by that a little bit. What do you make of the fact that we have all of these different sources of authority, but it still seems like when you watch the footage of what happened to George Floyd, or when you listen to the man who is masquerading as presidential these days, it really seems like there's a racial and an economic component to this that isn't built fairly. We like to tell every student that it's a meritocracy and a level playing field and anyone can become anything they want. I'm wondering how you see that.
I agree. Like I feel like there is like a boundary that like holds people back, whether it's economic or race, and it's been there like ever like since all throughout history, like you see it as a trend, and people claim that it's gone away or like it's been fixed or something. And it's like, it depends on how you look at it, really. Like if you focus on one area of something, you could say, oh yeah, they've gained a lot more opportunities. But if you look at it in another light too, like there's nothing gained and it's been the same all throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You know, in my family, there's a very strong tradition of really bright, motivated, highly intelligent women, and women who were entrepreneurs, women who survived and moved from country to country. I feel the same way about my wife and my daughter. And I can't help but notice, I'm bringing this up because I just noticed I'm the only guy here on the call today. and so my question is, how do you see this with regard to equity between men and women as well? How do you feel about your chances as you do what you want to do in life?
personally, me, like I want to go into a STEM field. I want to do engineering, some field in there. And there's not a lot of women in that field. So it's kind of discouraging when you don't see like the same examples or opportunities like given to us women than compared to men. So it's honestly for me very discouraging. Like even though people could say like, oh, we have more opportunities now, but like no one is allowing us to like actually go to that length, I feel like, because it's a lot of like, oh, it's usually all men in this field, you know, not women. And it's like, well, we can do it too, kind of, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are a lot of really amazing stories about women everywhere from NASA to the invention of the internet to, I'll send you some stuff. But what I'm really hoping is that when my daughter gets to the point where you are now, that she's looking at people like Deanna Blanco and saying, yeah, I got this. And even if not, I'm going to encourage you to just be a rebellion of one. If you don't see the kind of story you want to read, be that story and write it.
Thank you.
What about the rest of you? I'm curious.
My dad recently, not recently, but before this whole pandemic thing happened, my dad would go on business trips. And my dad came back with a book for me to read. And the book is amazing. It's basically about a whole lot of women in our history making change, but they never got credit because they reached beyond the limit. Some of them did get credit, but it was very rare that they got credit. And because they reached the limits and they like made changes to within their world, the men in the world didn't really like it, or some other people didn't like it also, but they changed it for the better. And there's this one story that there's this woman that was way smarter than Albert Einstein apparently. She was pretty smart and she knew Albert Einstein, and it was just great. It's a pretty good it's a pretty good book.
Wow. Do you know the title of it so you can share it with us?
I think it's called something Badass Broads, something like that.
Broads?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I'm laughing because the way that it looks, you're pronouncing it correctly. So a broad was a once upon a time not very nice way to refer to a woman who was, I don't know how to put this, like a woman who was not acting feminine enough for a sexist man to tolerate gently. That would be like a sassy broad. And so
Yeah.
women started using that term, and we see the same thing happen with words like the N-word, where when it's used as an insult, sometimes as a way to take back power, the people who are being insulted use the word and was like, yeah, I'm all that, and what do you got? And so it's kind of cool that there was a whole title of a book like that. But yeah, share it on your blog because I'd love to share that.
I
will. So I know that some of you have younger siblings, and I know that we're at this point where on the one hand, people feel a sense of hopelessness and like things are really huge. But at the same time, we also feel like we really want to contribute and change things for the better. How do we start that? Did you guys watch that video that I put on the blog? Did anybody see the guy talking to the young man? You guys want to see it? This is actually worth it if you have a minute or two. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and share this then. And let's go to, where did I put it? Here we go.
I understand, but we won't stand up for I understand. They get killed on the daily basis. Talk to me. I understand. How old are you? I'm tired of this. How old are you? I'm 45 years old. 45 and I'm 31. And I'm tired of seeing. And you the older generation than me, and I am too. And we've been standing around as the older ones, taking all this bullshit. Always hoping for a kumbaya fucking y'all. Come here. Always standing around for a kumbaya. Ain't nobody coming to protect us. Let me tell you, we gotta start our own fucking life. I understand. But let me tell you something right here. This 16. He's 16. Oh my God. Kill him, he's 16. What we gonna do? You tell me. What we gonna do? This ain't the way. Cause they ready to let loose. If the United States president say, if you lose this shoot, you think doing this going on? I know it. So it's but it's time to stand up. So at this point, I'm ready to die. But what's going on? Let me tell you something. That's the problem that we got. What you see right now, it's gonna happen 10 years from now. And at 26, you're gonna be doing the same thing I'm doing. You understand that? 10 years. You're gonna be right here too. But he also got to. So what I need to do right now at 16 is come up with a better way. Because how we doing it, it ain't working. He angry at 46. I'm angry at 31. You angry at 16. You understand me? Putting yourself in harm's way is not the way. No, it's not. You and another your counterparts the same age and that has that same power. Y'all come up with a better way. Cause we ain't doing it. Oh my God. And I have a 5-year-old son. Oh my God. And it ain't happening. I marched 4 years ago. Keep my mind stopped. Did the same shit y'all doing. The same exact thing night after night after night. It don't matter. Come up with a better way. You understand me? You keep yourself safe.
Wow. So when you see that, and that young man was about the same age that you are, what comes up for you?
A message to us knowing that we need to change. That because some people are depending on our generation to make the world better, actually better, and taking action.
Yeah. It's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, you kind of, when I was 16 and I heard the same kinds of things, because this is not new. On one hand, you look around and you say, hey, that's not fair. The adults are supposed to work this out. We're not supposed to have to deal with all the adult stuff until we get there. Can't you just take care of your own garbage? It's kind of like growing up in a divorced family, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then again, at the same time, that also means that we have a profound opportunity. Because if we can do the kinds of things while we're under stress, in the middle of a crisis, that remind people we can be calm, we can listen to the better angels of our nature, and we can be kind. Not just because I'm a white entitled guy, which is true. I wrote on the course blog today, sometimes I just feel dumb lucky because I know that I can walk into just about any room in our country and pass for what people think of when they go, oh, that's a guy I should listen to, which would be different if I wore a turban or if I had an accent or if I had an ethnically identifiable last name or if I had darker skin. So I think when we talk about this stuff, we can all own our own selves, and with that, our own biases. I know that sometimes I'm mouthier and I speak more truth to power because I'm not afraid of getting killed in the same way that I might be if I were African American or if I were Latinx or Hispanic. So one of the things that I really want to end, not really end our conversation, but as we come to the conclusion of our school year anyway, is actually leaving the door open. And I'll be saying something similar when we adjourn formally tomorrow, because we got to know each other under some really unique, unpredicted circumstances. The people who are on this call and the people who stuck with this, even after the campus closed, have really sort of become like extended family. And I mean that with all of the things I mean when I say family. So like having good arguments, having misunderstandings, wondering why someone's not calling or writing. And when you think about learning community, this is that. We've built it. So what I'd like to ask is whether you choose to write on the journal topic that I offered today, or whether you choose just to think about it out loud with your families, like I heard Odalise talking about at dinner, don't let this moment go to waste. There is a lot of trouble in the world, and that's for sure. But you know, there's almost always a lot of trouble, and in other times we tend to sweep it under the rug. Right now it's front and center and people are mindful about it, whether it's wearing a mask and not getting sick, or whether it's thinking about what it means to be black, brown, yellow, red, white, blue, green, all over in this country. So before we go, I just want to know if anything is coming up for you all, or if you have any questions for me. Then my request is this. I can hear all of the little hamsters in your brains and the wheels turning right now. You can't watch a video like that or have conversations like this and not be thinking, especially with you guys. Sorry, you women. So go and write something before it cools off for you. And tomorrow, when we celebrate the conclusion of the school year, and by the way, is everybody on this call planning on being with us at 1 o'clock tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Because I would have hated to get to tomorrow and then realize I didn't get to say goodbye to somebody. So, and I'm hoping that we get the biggest turnout of all tomorrow, because that's when I'm going to be able to thank everyone and conclude properly. But for now, take this stuff and write about it, even if it's on a piece of paper that you burn up afterwards, because it's too important for you to forget, and it's too important for all of us not to learn a little something from. And if you've got something to teach me, I am wide open. Anything else before we go?
Is there a probability of like Zooms again next year? Like, is there like a higher chance of that?
I'm gambling on it. And you know what? Thank you for mentioning that, because I do have a question for you. Tomorrow, I have a Zoom call with the superintendent, actually 2 superintendents, to talk about what we've done and how we might do things next year. As we've talked about before, you know, I'm right there with you. I would love to have people back on campus and be in person with one another. The problem is we don't really understand the virus, and we're not getting a whole lot of leadership. So I anticipate that school will probably try and reopen in some fashion. I anticipate that some people are going to get sick, and I anticipate the campus is going to close again. I don't know that for fact. That's just my crystal ball best guess. What I'm having that Zoom call tomorrow, though, is because the superintendents invited me to help them create a vision for what next year might look like. And what I'm going to be sharing is an idea for a virtual learning academy that can do 2 things. First, that can use technology like this, and we've only really scratched the surface. I kept it to Zoom calls and the course blogs because I knew that a lot of people weren't expecting this and didn't want or weren't even able to do much of anything. But if we set something up ahead of time where people can voluntarily commit or choose to make the most of their learning online, we can start from the very beginning in a way that makes a whole lot more sense and gives people the same sense of accomplishment and learning that they have in their classes, even the ones that are more traditional with tests and grades and percentages. So in a nutshell, the honest answer is nobody knows, but I'm trying to create an alternative so that if, for example, a student prefers to do things that way, or if we all have to do things that way, at least we have a model for what that looks like. And if any of you want to be a part of that, or play with me over the summer as I develop pieces, I just got off the line about an hour before we called with a CEO of a company that has figured out how to use text for students who don't have high-speed internet access. So if anybody's curious about that or wants to learn more with me over the summer, I'm happy to include you in that brain trust.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So Odalise, you know me, that was a long answer to a short question, but did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay. All right, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and I look very much forward to seeing you for our ultimate conversation tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Okay,
Okay.
bye, Mr. Preston.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.